It started with a closed-door conversation, so sensitive that even senior palace aides were ordered outside. Behind the walls of Clarence House, King Charles quietly revisited a plan that would place Sarah Ferguson back inside the royal fold, with a permanent residence tied to crown protection. But when Prince William learned what was being arranged behind his back, the future king reportedly reacted with a level of fury the palace had not seen in years. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the whispers sounded almost impossible to believe. For years, Sarah Ferguson had remained in that strange royal space between insider and outsider, never fully embraced, yet never completely removed. Even after the scandals, the public humiliation surrounding Prince Andrew, and the endless efforts to distance the monarchy from controversy, Sarah somehow remained connected to the very heart of royal life. Quiet lunches, private family gatherings, conversations the public never saw. And according to palace insiders, King Charles had begun questioning whether she deserved more than quiet sympathy behind closed doors. He allegedly wanted stability for her. Protection. A secure royal residence tied to crown oversight. But what seemed like an act of compassion to Charles reportedly looked very different through William's eyes. The future king had spent years trying to modernize the monarchy's image, carefully rebuilding public trust after one devastating scandal after another. Every move was calculated, every appearance measured. William understood something older royals often refused to admit: the public no longer separated private royal decisions from the survival of the institution itself. And when details of Charles's private discussions reached Kensington Palace through trusted insiders, William reportedly saw the proposal not as kindness, but as a dangerous reopening of wounds the monarchy had barely survived. The secrecy surrounding the arrangement only made things worse. Senior aides were allegedly instructed not to discuss the matter outside a tight inner circle. Certain staff members were removed from meetings entirely. Even long-time courtiers reportedly became uneasy as rumours spread through palace corridors that Charles was preparing to make a deeply controversial decision without consulting the future king. What truly intensified the situation was the timing. Behind palace walls, anxiety over Prince Andrew's shrinking influence had already become impossible to ignore. Financial uncertainty, fading public support, and growing pressure from royal advisors had reportedly pushed Andrew into one of the weakest positions of his royal life. Some insiders claimed Charles viewed Sarah Ferguson as collateral damage in a battle she did not create. Others whispered that the king still carried emotional loyalty to old family bonds that William no longer believed could survive in modern Britain. And somewhere inside that divide stood Catherine, quietly observing the growing storm with concern. Palace insiders allegedly noticed tension building almost immediately after Kensington Palace learned the full extent of the proposal. Catherine reportedly worried not only about the public backlash, but about the message it would send at a time when the monarchy was already fighting for stability. Then came the moment that changed everything. According to royal whispers, William confronted senior palace figures after discovering just how advanced the conversations had become. What shocked insiders was not merely his anger, but the intensity behind it. The Prince of Wales reportedly believed this crossed a line the monarchy could not afford to cross again. Court circles began buzzing with claims that William saw the arrangement as symbolic of a much deeper problem inside the royal institution, a refusal by older generations to recognize how fragile public trust had become. The disagreement quickly stopped being about property or residences. It became about control, authority, the future direction of the crown itself. Because the deeper William looked into the arrangement, the more he realized this was never just about Sarah Ferguson, it was about the fragile balance of power inside the monarchy itself. Long before the confrontation erupted, whispers inside royal circles suggested King Charles had made a private promise, one rooted not in politics, but loyalty to the past. Despite years of scandal surrounding Prince Andrew, Charles reportedly believed Sarah Ferguson had remained one of the few figures still protecting the family from complete collapse. And now, behind palace walls, he was preparing to reward that loyalty in a way that could reshape everything. For decades, Sarah Ferguson occupied a strange and almost tragic position inside the royal world. Publicly, she was often treated like a figure from another era of royal scandal, someone whose mistakes had permanently pushed her beyond the palace gates. But privately, insiders claimed the story was far more complicated. While others drifted away from Prince Andrew during the darkest moments of his downfall, Sarah reportedly stayed close. She defended him when few dared to speak his name openly. She remained near Royal Lodge. She continued protecting the fragile structure of family life behind closed doors, while the monarchy itself fought to survive one humiliation after another. And according to whispers circulating through Clarence House, King Charles never forgot that loyalty. What made the situation even more explosive was the emotional weight behind it. Charles had spent years carrying the burden of a divided monarchy, watching public trust weaken under relentless controversy, family fractures, and endless media storms. Yet those close to the king allegedly believed he still viewed Sarah Ferguson not as an outsider, but as part of the family regardless of titles, scandals, or public opinion. To Charles, loyalty mattered, endurance mattered, and some palace insiders quietly claimed he saw Sarah as someone who had absorbed decades of humiliation without ever fully turning against the institution itself. That belief reportedly became the foundation of a private plan involving a protected royal residence, possibly tied to an unused estate linked to crown oversight. The proposal was never meant for public discussion. It was supposed to remain hidden until every detail had already been secured. But secrecy inside royal life rarely stays buried for long. The deeper staff members looked into the arrangement, the more divided the palace became. Some senior aides allegedly believed Charles was acting out of compassion and old-fashioned duty. Others feared the consequences could be catastrophic. The monarchy was already balancing on unstable ground after years of reputational damage surrounding Andrew, and many worried that any gesture appearing to restore royal privilege would ignite public outrage overnight. Behind closed doors, arguments reportedly intensified between advisors loyal to Charles and younger figures aligned more closely with William's vision for the future. The atmosphere became tense, controlled, uncomfortable. Certain conversations stopped the moment unfamiliar staff entered the room. Meetings were shortened. Documents allegedly moved by hand rather than electronically. It was no longer just a family matter. It had become a political fault line inside the monarchy itself. And then, there was William. At first, the Prince of Wales reportedly only sensed fragments of what was happening. A whispered conversation here. An unusual meeting there. Advisors suddenly refusing to answer direct questions. But William had spent years learning how palace systems worked, and what disturbed him most was not merely the proposal itself, it was the deliberate secrecy surrounding it. Insiders claimed he began suspecting that senior figures were intentionally keeping Kensington Palace in the dark until the arrangement became impossible to stop. To William, that silence felt like betrayal. Worse, it reopened old frustrations that had quietly existed between father and son for years. Because beneath the debate over Sarah Ferguson stood a much larger conflict about the monarchy's future, its survival, and the painful difference between Charles' loyalty to the past and William's fear of repeating it. And as details of the residence proposal slowly surfaced, William began preparing for a confrontation that would expose years of buried resentment between father and son. When Prince William finally stepped into the room, insiders claimed the atmosphere changed instantly. Gone was the calm diplomatic prince the public usually saw. In his place stood the future king, cold, direct, and reportedly unwilling to compromise. Sources whispered that William viewed the entire arrangement as a dangerous attempt to reopen doors the monarchy had spent years trying to close. And what happened next allegedly stunned even Charles himself. By that point, the tension inside royal circles had already become impossible to contain. For days, whispers had spread through palace offices that Kensington Palace was demanding answers about meetings held behind closed doors. Advisors were suddenly being questioned, schedules quietly rearranged. Certain aides reportedly stopped communicating through official channels altogether, fearing details of the residents' proposal would leak beyond royal control. But William no longer cared about protecting the silence. According to insiders, the Prince of Wales entered the confrontation already convinced that something far bigger than Sarah Ferguson was unfolding behind palace walls. To him, this was not an isolated act of kindness. It was the beginning of a dangerous reversal that threatened everything he believed the monarchy had learned from years of public humiliation. Sources close to the palace claimed William immediately challenged senior advisors over what he allegedly called a backdoor restoration of royal privilege. The language itself reportedly shocked people in the room. This was not diplomatic concern. This was fury sharpened by years of frustration. William had spent much of his adult life trying to reshape the monarchy into something leaner, more disciplined, and more accountable to public opinion. He understood the damage scandals had inflicted on the institution. He had watched trust collapse during some of the darkest periods of royal crisis. And now, according to whispers from inside Kensington Palace, he feared his father was preparing to undo years of painful recovery through private emotional decisions hidden from public scrutiny. What made the clash even more explosive was how deeply personal it quickly became. Insiders described heated exchanges between Clarence House and Kensington Palace aides, unlike anything seen in years. Some staff reportedly defended Charles fiercely, arguing the king was acting from compassion and loyalty rather than recklessness. Others quietly sided with William, warning that public outrage would erupt if the arrangement became official. The divide inside the palace widened almost overnight. Advisors stopped speaking openly in hallways. Meetings reportedly became tense exercises in controlled silence. Everyone understood the truth no one wanted to say aloud. This was becoming a power struggle between the reign of the current king and the vision of the future one. And behind William's determination stood Catherine. Though she reportedly remained silent publicly, insiders claimed the Princess of Wales privately shared many of William's fears. Catherine understood how fragile public trust had become after years of royal turmoil, and according to whispers inside Kensington Palace, she worried the monarchy could not survive another perception of secret favouritism tied to Andrew's shadow. Some sources even claimed Catherine became one of the few people capable of calming William during the worst moments of the internal conflict. But even her quiet support could not soften the emotional weight driving him forward. Because beneath the political arguments and strategic concerns was something much older, something buried far deeper than property disputes or royal protocol. For William, this was never just about Sarah Ferguson. It was about memory, about history repeating itself behind palace walls while older generations insisted nothing had changed. Every hidden conversation, every protected scandal, every carefully managed silence reminded him of the pain that had shaped his childhood and haunted the monarchy for decades. The confrontation with Charles reportedly stopped feeling like a disagreement over royal housing and became something far more painful, a son questioning whether his father truly understood the damage those old systems had caused. And behind William's resistance was an older wound, one tied to Andrew, Diana, and the painful memories that still haunted the next generation of royals. Every royal crisis leaves a shadow behind, and this one carried the unmistakable shadow of Prince Andrew. Palace insiders claimed William believed any public gesture towards Sarah Ferguson would inevitably drag Andrew back into the spotlight. What Charles reportedly viewed as compassion, William saw as a catastrophic risk. And as tensions escalated, old divisions inside the House of Windsor began reopening faster than anyone expected. By then, the atmosphere surrounding the monarchy had become painfully fragile. The crown was still carrying the scars of years filled with scandal, public anger, and questions about accountability that never fully disappeared. Inside Kensington Palace, sources claimed William had grown increasingly convinced that the monarchy could not survive another perception of secrecy or protected privilege connected to Andrew's name. It did not matter whether Sarah Ferguson herself remained publicly well-liked in certain circles. To William, according to insiders, the issue was symbolism. Any gesture towards Sarah would inevitably reopen conversations about Andrew, his controversies, and the painful damage already inflicted on the royal institution. And that was precisely what terrified him. Those closest to William reportedly described a prince no longer thinking only as a son, but as a future monarch already preparing for the survival battles ahead. He had spent years watching public confidence shift unpredictably, watching younger generations grow less emotionally attached to royal tradition and more demanding of transparency. He understood something older palace figures allegedly still struggled to accept, that perception could destroy the monarchy faster than scandal itself. The public did not separate individuals from institutions anymore. One mistake became everyone's burden. One act of perceived favoritism became proof that nothing inside palace walls had truly changed. And according to whispers circulating through royal offices, William feared his father was underestimating that danger, because emotion had begun clouding judgment. Charles, however, reportedly viewed the situation through an entirely different lens. Some insiders claimed the king felt deeply frustrated by what he saw as William's coldness toward people who had remained loyal to the family through decades of crisis. To Charles, Sarah Ferguson represented endurance. She had not written explosive memoirs. She had not publicly turned against the institution. Despite humiliation, financial struggles, and years outside formal royal life, she had reportedly continued protecting family unity in private. That loyalty mattered enormously to Charles. But as the disagreement intensified, palace staff allegedly began noticing a dangerous shift in tone. What started as a private policy dispute slowly became emotional warfare between competing visions of duty itself. Senior courtiers soon found themselves trapped in the middle. Some remained fiercely loyal to Charles and believed the king deserved authority to handle family matters without interference from Kensington Palace. Others quietly feared William was right. Behind closed doors, aides reportedly warned that public backlash could spiral out of control if reports of the resident's proposal became public knowledge. Staff members began choosing sides carefully, measuring every conversation, every silence, every expression. The palace no longer felt united. It felt divided into invisible camps, separated by fear, loyalty, and uncertainty about the monarchy's future direction. And in the center of the storm stood Sarah Ferguson herself. According to insiders, Sarah allegedly became painfully aware that her name had triggered one of the most explosive internal conflicts of Charles's reign. Some whispered she felt trapped between gratitude toward the king and guilt over the damage unfolding around her. Others claimed she feared becoming the latest symbol of a monarchy, unable to escape its past. Yet while royal figures struggled privately, the outside world was beginning to notice something unusual. Reporters started asking questions. Royal correspondents sensed tension behind carefully staged appearances. The palace's refusal to address growing rumors only intensified media suspicion. Every silence became louder. Every unanswered question became fuel for speculation. Yet the conflict was no longer staying behind closed doors, because someone inside the palace had already started leaking details to the press. The moment reporters began asking questions, panic reportedly spread through royal offices. Suddenly, private meetings were being scrutinized, schedules altered, and aides warned not to speak to outsiders. But the leaks kept coming. Anonymous sources painted a picture of a monarchy divided in ways far more dangerous than the public realized. And at the center of the storm stood William and Charles, father and son, locked in a silent battle neither side wanted exposed. Behind palace walls, Communications teams allegedly moved into crisis mode almost overnight. Advisors scrambled to contain speculation before it spiraled beyond control. But every attempt at silence only made the rumors louder. Royal aides were reportedly questioned about private conversations, while certain staff members suddenly found themselves under suspicion for leaking sensitive details to journalists. Some insiders claimed the palace no longer trusted its own corridors. Every whisper felt dangerous. Every conversation carried risk. And while the public focused on Sarah Ferguson, those inside the institution understood something much darker was unfolding beneath the surface. William's opposition had reportedly evolved into something far more serious than disagreement. According to royal insiders, the Prince of Wales began treating the situation as a defining test of the monarchy's future. He allegedly warned senior figures that the crown could not survive another perception of hidden privilege or emotional decision-making tied to past scandals. To William, the institution needed discipline, boundaries, and a modern image built on accountability rather than private loyalty. Some aides even whispered that he compared the crisis to earlier royal disasters that permanently damaged public trust, including the years of secrecy and emotional chaos surrounding Diana's painful history within the family. Charles, however, reportedly struggled under the growing pressure from every direction. On one side stood loyalty, compassion, and decades of emotional ties to people he still considered family, regardless of scandal. On the other stood the cold reality William kept forcing the palace to confront. The monarchy's survival now depended on public perception more than tradition. Insiders claimed the king grew increasingly frustrated by what he viewed as interference from Kensington Palace, especially as William refused to publicly support the residents' proposal. The silence between father and son reportedly became heavier with every passing day. Amid the turmoil, Catherine allegedly emerged as one of the few stabilizing figures behind the scenes. Quietly but firmly, insiders claimed she supported William's belief that the monarchy could not afford another reputational crisis tied to Andrew's shadow. Younger royals were also rumoured to be privately siding with William, believing his harder approach reflected the reality of a changing Britain. But the emotional strain inside the family reportedly became impossible to ignore. What began as a dispute over Sarah Ferguson had transformed into a battle over authority, legacy, and control itself. And as tensions reached their breaking point, insiders claimed the real issue was no longer the residents' proposal at all. The true question haunting Buckingham Palace had become far more dangerous: who truly controls the monarchy now? And just when it seemed the argument could not grow more explosive, an unexpected decision inside Buckingham Palace changed everything overnight. Then came the decision no one expected. After weeks of tension, insiders claimed King Charles quietly paused discussions surrounding Sarah Ferguson's future residence. But instead of calming the palace, the sudden reversal only deepened suspicion. Was Charles backing down under pressure from William, or was something even bigger happening behind closed doors that the public still hadn't discovered? According to royal whispers, the order came quietly and without explanation. Meetings connected to the residents' proposal were allegedly halted. Advisors were instructed to avoid discussing Sarah Ferguson publicly. Certain conversations disappeared from official schedules altogether. Yet inside palace walls, the silence did not feel like peace. It felt like retreat. Some insiders believed William had effectively forced the king into backing away from a decision that threatened the monarchy's fragile public standing. Others feared Charles had merely postponed the arrangement while searching for another path forward away from Kensington Palace's growing influence. But regardless of the truth, one thing became painfully clear: the battle between father and son had changed the balance of power inside the monarchy forever. For William's supporters, the pause was interpreted as a victory for modernization and discipline. The Prince of Wales had reportedly made it impossible for the palace to ignore public perception any longer. His allies quietly argued that the monarchy could not survive by protecting old loyalties while demanding public trust at the same time. But inside Clarence House, sources claimed the mood was far more bitter. Charles allegedly felt wounded by how publicly the conflict had spiraled, especially after years spent trying to preserve unity within a family already fractured by scandal, betrayal, and loss. What began as an act of compassion toward Sarah Ferguson had evolved into one of the most emotionally painful disputes of his reign. And through it all, Sarah Ferguson reportedly remained silent. No denials, no public defense, no emotional interviews. Just silence as rumors exploded across headlines and palace insiders leaked conflicting versions of the truth. Some claimed she felt devastated watching her name become the center of another royal war. Others whispered she understood the real conflict had stopped being about her long ago. Because by the end of it all, the palace was left with something far more dangerous than a leaked residence plan. It was left with the image of a monarchy divided between two visions of survival. One vision belonged to Charles, shaped by loyalty, forgiveness, family bonds, and old royal traditions that believed personal duty mattered more than public outrage. The other belonged to William, colder, more disciplined, and driven by the belief that the crown could only survive through ruthless modernization and strict accountability. And according to insiders, the clash between those two visions exposed fractures inside the royal household far deeper than the public had ever imagined. Royal experts reportedly began warning that future conflicts could become even more visible as William's influence continued growing behind palace walls. Throughout the crisis, Catherine quietly emerged as William's strongest support system, standing beside him while tensions with Charles reportedly became more strained by the day. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace worked desperately to project calm and unity to the outside world, even as distrust allegedly spread internally among advisors and senior royals choosing sides in silence. Public debate intensified over what kind of monarchy Britain truly wanted, one rooted in tradition and emotional loyalty, or one willing to sacrifice even family ties for survival. Because behind the carefully staged royal smiles and palace ceremonies, one question still lingers in silence. When the crown finally passes to William, how many royal ties will be left standing? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.